why did you write this book? Because it's not just a normal cookbook. You've got some really interesting concepts about meals and socializing and the impact on nutrition. So why don't we start there? And then I have a whole bunch of questions to ask you because I have some new theories in my head that I think you're going to be able to answer.
Of course, yeah. So I'm a nutritionist, so I've been in the field for 21 years, and I'm a big fan of food, but I don't see food in the same kind of lens as folks that went to a traditional university like I did that get into this field.
Dr. Mindy here.
Your body is in a war zone.
Different parts of the brain get activated depending upon how stressed you are.
When you look at it from that inflammatory.
It's interesting. I mean, that has some merit to it for sure.
And you can't control everything.
I'd say.
And what about a woman who is not pregnant, but she's aiming?
Okay, well, Shawn, I feel like you had me over to your house to have dinner, hence your podcast house, and now I get to have you over to my house to have dinner. Although we're not eating, we're talking about some really cool nutritional things. So welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
It's my pleasure. And also, of course, we know we've heard this before, that you are what you eat, but it's also you are what you think, you are what you share, these different ideas. We're consuming this stuff. So we really are sitting down for a meal. So it's my pleasure.
It's so well said. That's been my latest rally cry, is that we need to sit down and with as many different people as possible. We need to engage even in conversations with people we don't agree with so that we can start to expand our thought process. And I can't think of a better place to put a bunch of people together to really vet some great ideas than a dinner table or even a meal table at all. So I want to start off with, why did you write this book? Because it's not just a normal cookbook. You've got some really interesting concepts about meals and socializing and the impact on nutrition. So why don't we start there? And then I have a whole bunch of questions to ask you because I have some new theories in my head that I think you're going to be able to answer.
Of course, yeah. So I'm a nutritionist, so I've been in the field for 21 years, and I'm a big fan of food, but I don't see food in the same kind of lens as folks that went to a traditional university like I did that get into this field. Food is so much more than just food. Food truly is, it's information. And there's this bustling field right now of nutrigenomics, nutrigenetics, and looking at how each bite of food that we take changes our genetic expression. It is that powerful. It's information, right? And I remember in school, and we were taught this kind of fundamental process of how our copies of ourselves are getting printed, essentially from DNA to RNA to protein. And I had a conversation with one of my mentors, and he's really the pioneer who pushed epigenetics into popular culture, Dr. Bruce Lipton. And in one of our conversations, he shared with me that, Shawn, yes, proteins are kind of that fundamental last step that we see as far as the copies that were getting printed out. But one epigenetic input, like a bite of food, can alter the expression or the potential of those proteins getting printed out. There can be up to 3,000 different options on the copies that are getting printed of us. And that's just from one gene. All right. So we have so much influence over that. And the reason that I wrote this book at its core is it isn't just the food itself, it's the conditions in which we eat. It's the environment that is, of course, determining our food choices themselves, but also how we're interacting with our food, how we're interacting with the people around us, deeply, deeply influences the impact of the food that we're eating. And so, once I found out some of this data, it was like I felt this burning within my spirit to put this together. And like you said, this is not a conventional cookbook by any means.
No.
Me being a big foodie, you're going to get that. You're going to get the most delicious. And right now, the book has been out for about a week now as of this recording, and the internet is going nuts. All right. People are making these recipes and sharing them, and they are flipping out. And from, older folks all the way to young kids are just loving the recipes, because I've had some time in this field to figure some of this stuff out. But at its core, the book also has 250 plus scientific references in it, embedded in the content.
That's so cool.
So that for
That's
example,
cool for a cookbook. That's really cool for a cookbook. I haven't seen that in a cookbook.
It's never been done before, but it has to be in a way that is entertaining, that's awe-inspiring, that's fun, that's also beautiful and elegant. And that's kind of what life was qualifying me to be able to do, working in this field this long, and also having my show for the past 10 plus years, and just being able to take complex things and make them palatable and entertaining and fun, and just like, oh, I love that, let's do that. Those kind
Yeah.
of revelations. And so, the last little piece here that we're going to dive into is truly like, I've got a ton of science looking at this intersection between our social circles, our friends, our family, and the people around us, and our health outcomes, all under the sphere of eating a meal together, and how that can impact our health. And it is going to blow people's minds.
Yeah. So are you saying that the environment I'm eating a meal in can actually trigger genes on and maybe trigger genes off? Like has a genetic influence on me?
Absolutely. And so we go through some of this in the book as well, and pointing out some of these different studies. But it's really important to understand that the most influential factor, if we're talking about epigenetics, is looking at the influence of our environment, our external and internal environment. And we have these, basically, they're kind of like antennas. They're these protein antennas on our cells that are picking up signals from the environment. But all of that stuff going on around us, it's still going to be based on our perception of them,
Hmm.
because even our thoughts change the chemistry in our bodies immediately. And so let me give an overarching study just to kind of look at like,
Yep.
what is the most known as far as like factual data that we have on our relationships that influence on our health. And so I had a conversation recently with the director of the longest running longitudinal study on human health and longevity. All right, so that
Mm.
means longitudinal means they're following the same people, and this has been going on for over 80 years. So he's the fourth director to have this baton passed to him at Harvard. And the data indicates clearly, it's not even close. It's not even close. Yes, sleep wellness is important, exercise, good food, all that stuff is great. But the quality of our relationships is by far the most influential factor on how long we're going to live and live healthfully. The quality of our relationships. And so, in addition to that, one of the studies that I shared in the book, and this is a massive study, this is a meta analysis of
Mm.
148 studies. This is a huge set of data. So, looking at multiple studies together in one study, and this included about 300,000 participants as well. And the researchers found that having healthy social bonds led to about a 50% reduction in all cause mortality for these
Mm.
300,000
Crazy.
people. All right. So that means it's a 50% reduction in dying prematurely from essentially everything. That's how
Crazy.
important of an epigenetic influence our relationships really are. So, yes, absolutely.
But and I think some of us have heard stats like that before, but what I really don't wanna get lost in this conversation is this marriage between the social science and the nutritional science. Because it would be easy to hear that statistic and say, well, yeah, I have good friends. We go out into the bar every Thursday night and we have buffalo wings and beer, and it's like they're my homies. But what I think you're saying is that whenever we sit down to a meal, if we can add good principles of nutrition with good principles of socializing,
Yeah.
now we have taken our health to a whole next level. It's not about eating a healthy meal while looking at Instagram and deciding you don't like what people are saying. And it's not about going out to the bar with the buddies and eating whatever you want, but you're socializing. You got to bring both those principles together. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And these are things that our genes expect from us through our evolution.
Yeah.
We did food together. We did food together. And if you look at, there are still some hunter-gatherer tribes around on the planet today. There are a couple of different locations where you could find them. But all of us, we evolved in kind of a tribal construct, and we did all of the parts of food together: hunting, gathering, the food preparation, and of course, eating together, and also celebration. It is during this act where you even said earlier, like alluding to like the dinner table is really a unifier for conversation, but it's also an important place for passing on culture and tradition. Prior to the advent of
Oh,
books, this is how we passed on traditions and culture and insights and important revelations about our place in the universe from generation to generation was surrounding this celebration of food and eating together, right? This is where the kids were getting,
Love
there's
that.
dramatization of things, there's a storytelling, there's song, there's dance. We see dramatizations of this act. If you go to a place like Hawaii, for example, and they put on a luau, right?
Mm.
But that is something that is embedded in all of our culture. My wife is from Kenya, right? So there's a
Mm.
closer lineage, a closer connection to that thing that everybody was doing on different parts of this planet, right? And now the question is what happens when that part gets pulled away? Not only do we kind of move away from this tribal construct, I could say devolve in a sense, but we started to live, we created, communities or neighborhoods, right? But even within that, and there's still some more of that today where you still have your extended family in close proximity. All right. That was still a thing. Then, just in the last couple of decades, we've branched out even further. And oftentimes we don't have extended family nearby. And then,
Mm.
just within the last 20 years, something we really couldn't have even seen coming fractured our connection even more because
Mm.
even inside of our own household, we're now divided because of our devices. People
Yeah.
can be existing there at the same time and completely pulled into another reality and not present with the people in our own household. And so this is really a call to action to bring us back together because as the data indicates, there's something really important missing in that ingredient for a healthy, functional human being that was pulled away. And the last little part here I want to share on this is I'll tell you the study that prompted me is just like I have to write this book. And there was these researchers at Harvard were compiling data on eating behaviors of family members and their food choices for years. And I
Mm.
was just like,
Mm.
what? This is amazing. And I was digging through the data and they found that families that eat together on a regular basis strangely were consuming more real foods, consuming significantly, not even close, significantly higher amounts of essential nutrients that prevented diseases in those family members. And they were just kind of naturally consuming less ultra processed foods, chips and soda, and all these kind of nefarious ingredients. Also, they noted they were consuming significantly less. And then couple that with a study that was published in the journal Pediatrics, where it's looking at specifically the health outcomes of kids. And they found that eating together with their parents or their caregivers on a regular basis, they found 3 meals a week was the minimum effective dose. There was a dramatically reduced incidence of development of obesity in those children, significantly reduced incidence of developing eating disorders. And then for the parents, one other study I'll just throw in here as well. This was looking at office workers at IBM in the tech industry, and they were tracking their eating behaviors with their family and stress management with work. And they found that when these office workers were able to consistently eat dinner with their families, regardless of how high their stress was at work, they were able to essentially metabolize that stress, remain more balanced, work morale stayed high, productivity, stress levels stayed negligible. Again, it could be super stressful at work, but there was something that was helping them to metabolize and process that stress. By the way, I don't talk about this often. Also in the study, they found that even if there was conflicts in the family, if there was personal conflicts, all of that stuff was reduced when they consistently ate dinner with their family. But as soon as work and other obligations cut into that face-to-face mealtime, guess what happened? Stress levels became intolerable. Work morale went down, productivity went down, their health started to go down. There's something essential our DNA expects with food and family, food and friends. Friends are included too, food and community. There's something really protective for us as a species when we do those two things together.
I can tell you why this happens hormonally. Because and this is it's so interesting, Shawn, that you're talking about this because this was like a recent aha that I had watching so many people use the principles that I wrote about in Fast Like a Girl. And I was asking myself, like, why do some people use those principles and they like drop weight really quickly? They get really good results. And other people seem to get stuck. What is the stickers? What is causing people to get stuck with that result? And when I dove into it, it's all goes back to this hormonal hierarchy. And the hierarchy is that if you are saturated with cortisol, you become insulin resistant. So it does not matter what the quality of your meal is is, or I guess it does matter, but it matters as equally how you're what you're going to do with that cortisol. So I got thinking, like, well, what if you bring oxytocin in? If oxytocin comes in, then now cortisol goes down and now you're more insulin sensitive. Okay, well, how do we bring oxytocin into the meal? And literally, Sean, I was like thinking this the last couple of months, and I was like, we got to eat around people we love. We got to eat in a oxytocin rich environment. And that's what you're saying. And when you're saturated with oxytocin, your cells, literally from a blood sugar standpoint, are going to be able to take that blood sugar, put it in so that it can activate what it's supposed to activate in the cell so it doesn't get stored as fat. So I literally have been like thinking the environment matters as much as the quality of the food. And you just proved
Absolutely.
it scientifically.
Yes, and actually there's in some ways this even trumps that, which I'll talk about in just a second, but you hit it right on the nose because I'm a big why person. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
this is crazy that people are getting these health outcomes, these benefits from eating with people that they care about. And right, it goes to and oxytocin gets this nickname of like the cuddle hormone or the love
yeah,
hormone. And it's one of the few things that's been found to essentially kind of neutralize the activity of cortisol. And
yes,
it's not just like a surface thing. There's a big switch over because with cortisol, which is for a lot of us, it's that, it's get up and go and all the things. We're very good at getting hype and getting up and getting going, but we're not very good at down regulating, right? So cortisol is part of this kind of sympathetic, we call it quote fight or flight nervous system, which for most of us today, which is always it's always just running in the background. And this is sort of like a system that is binary. Like you're not doing both at the same time. You're either fight or
right,
flight, or you switch over to the parasympathetic. And here's the nickname for
right,
this one. This is where it all comes together: rest and digest.
right.
Rest and digest nervous system. And so what we're seeing as well is we're seeing improved assimilation of nutrients. We're seeing higher levels of satiety when we're eating with people that we care about. And also, again, the most remarkable aspect, and you just detailed some of the kind of underneath the hood things, is we're producing more oxytocin. And it's so rejuvenative in so many different ways. And also, there's
Mhm.
another layer of this, which is just the psychological aspect, right?
Yeah,
Um, when we are with people that we care about, and in particular, especially for kids, just to feel seen, especially today,
yeah,
we have a deep human need to feel significance, like we matter. And so often, again, with all of our screens, and all of us have been guilty of this, of just being like, not now, I'm just, let me finish this thing. And our kids are just growing and changing at lightning speed. And so to
yeah,
to move all that stuff to the side, to get real face time, and to allow our kids and ourselves too to feel seen, to feel important, and to be able to offload stress, right? Just the act of talking, even if you're not talking about the thing, just the act of being present starts to
yeah.
offload stress. And especially again in a safe space where you feel cared for. This is why those researchers found it wasn't just a reduction in work stress, there was a reduction in relationship conflict. They didn't have to talk about the conflict, but just being around those people, especially, there's something remarkable about doing it with food that's really, really nourishing for our souls.
Oh, I'm sure it's primal, don't you think? It's like we probably in the primal days, we didn't like take our piece of meat and like go off into the corner and eat. We ate around a fire. And so I'm sure there's a primal reason behind that. And it's interesting. The other thing that you have me thinking is so I've been working personally coaching some people recently that have had some like relationship challenges with food. Let's just put it this way. And I put continuous glucose monitors on them is what I do. And one of the women said to me recently, she's like, "I don't understand how I could eat a high carb meal with my family." She's like, "I had family in town." She was staying in Copenhagen. She's like, "I've had family in town and all of a sudden they show up, I eat all the wrong things and my glucose goes down. Explain
Hmm.
to me how that happened." And that's
Yes.
when I said, because the environment you are eating in matters. You can manage
Yes.
your blood sugar more effectively if you eat in that rest and digest, in that oxytocin rich environment. So yeah, I think it's so simple, it's so primal, and yet why aren't we doing it?
Yes, that is the question. And there's a reason why, of course. And you just really alluded to what I meant earlier. Like this potentially trumps even the food quality itself, which of course it
Yes,
matters. And what we tend to do in our culture today, and there's even a name for it, is stress eat. All right, we're stress
yes.
eating. When we're in a stress state is when we tend to eat, quote, bad food, right? So things that are richer in sugar, in particular carbohydrates, but there's a primal reason for that too. These carbohydrates get serotonin going in our bodies a little bit more to just balance us out, make us feel a little bit more calm and balanced. But sometimes we don't realize that we're doing this. But the very best time to eat foods that we might slap a label on as being like a bad food or a cheat meal or something like that is when you feel good, when you are in that kind of oxytocin state, when you're feeling good, when you are with friends and family. This is one of the things we see in other cultures where, again, the celebration, they might be having wine and bread and all these things, but they're still their metabolic health is so far superior to
Right.
people that even eating here are eating a quote healthy diet, but they're eating oftentimes in isolation. And one of the studies, this was published in Nutrition Journal, found that yes, we do have strong data affirming that when we eat alone in isolation on a consistent basis, in particular in front of screens, we tend to have poorer food quality. We tend to eat
Mm.
more as well, and of course, we see worse health outcomes as well. And so this isn't just guesstimating or thinking that this is a theory. Like we know that this is the case. We're just getting more and more science to affirm this. And so what we want to do is proactively use this to our advantage. And as you mentioned,
Yeah.
why is this happening? I mean, this is really simple, but we here in the here in the United States, we invented the TV dinner. We invented it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And
I
the
remember.
marketing.
I'm a product of the '70s. I had TV dinners.
Me too. I grew up in the 80s. You know, I had the Salisbury steak, mashed
Oh, yep,
potatoes, and that
yep.
limp
Oh,
corn, absolutely.
and the
And
apple pie. The apple pie was in the upper right-hand corner.
listen, and also, of course, like it's changing even our palate, right? So it's all
Yes.
these soft, kind of mushy. I'm eating a mushy steak, right? And so I'm not getting these flavor inputs and these different texture inputs that also drive us because after a meal like that, we have to have the apple pie. We have to have something with some texture, with
Mm.
some crunch to it, or potato chips, or crunchy cookies, or things like that. And by the way, this is affirmed. I don't know if people have heard about this. It's called the Sonic Chip Experiment, and it actually won a Nobel Prize. All right, the experiment itself, an Ig Nobel Prize, which is kind of like on the periphery of the Nobel Prizes, things that are kind of weird that essentially can make people
Right.
laugh, but also make you think. And so the sonic chip experiment, the researchers took test subjects and had them put on headphones so that they can modulate the crunch and the experience of the crunch from eating, not Doritos, Pringles, because the Pringles are
Mm.
uniform in that tall can. They're pretty much the same uniform size, density, all the things. But what they found was that by increasing the volume of certain notes of the crunchiness, it made the study participants feel like the chips were fresher than they were, about 15% fresher and better for them, essentially. More enjoyable was the key word. So more enjoyment, better for them, fresher, all the things based on the sound. And this speaks to
Wow.
like our experience of food isn't just about the food. It's not just about taste,
Mm.
it's textures, it's sound. And this goes back, we keep jumping back into early humanity, but these were all essential inputs for us to really find out if that food is good for us, if it's safe to eat.
Yeah.
These are all
Yeah.
inputs because there's a big difference between biting into a crisp apple and a soft, mushy apple, right?
Yes.
We would be
Yes.
averse to that. But with processed foods, they found ways to trick our brains because it's not even, there's nothing real or healthy or natural about it at this point. So they manipulate certain aspects of the food to keep us coming back for more.
The thought of even biting into a crunchy, crisp apple, like, I'm salivating thinking it's the you're right, it's the crisp, I'm like, "Oof, that sounds so good." So, how do we create this environment? Because it sounds like, oh, as simple as just put yourself around people you love, eat around people you love, but, there's a lot of households where the families are fighting, or you don't really love the people. Maybe you're at work and you're in a meeting, it's super stressful, or maybe you're alone. Like, how do we help support those people in creating a loving, I'm going to call it like a love bubble around them while they eat so that they
Mm.
get the best out of their food choices?
Thank you for asking that question. Such a good question. There, we have our lifestyles are as diverse as we are as people.
Mhm.
And we need to honor that because we are living in 2023 as of this recording. And, we have all this innovation. We have all these cool things for us to engage with. And we have to look at the results for us as far as our health is concerned. We have multiple epidemics of chronic diseases and mental health conditions that have never been seen before. They've skyrocketed in the last couple of decades. So we need to be aware of that. There's a mismatch happening. We have all this apparent
Mhm.
innovation, but we're not doing well as far as our health is concerned. And so we don't want to shun all the cool stuff we have access to. That's all good. We could still, social media and, media and all the technology and all that stuff. That's fine. But we need our genes are expecting us to interact with real people in the real world. So how do we do that? And to transition into that is like the final point of how do we get here, which is processed food industry has made it seem like it's so complicated. You don't have to work anymore. Just get out of the kitchen, put your
Right.
kid a hot pocket in the microwave, dinner is served, right? This marketing to us that it is difficult to take care of ourselves and it's difficult to
Mhm.
feed our families. And they've
Yeah.
made it ridiculously simple on the surface, but the mid to long-term ramifications is massive problems with our health. And
Yeah.
so wherever we are in the spectrum, family, you just mentioned like sometimes we don't necessarily like the people that we might be living
No.
with. All right.
Yeah.
And that's just a state of reality for some people. I don't know. Have you ever seen the TV show Yellowstone?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
All
yeah.
right. Beth Dutton has not finished a dinner with her family ever. All right. It just doesn't happen. She's going to
It's
be
a
a
great
problem.
example. It's a great
But
example.
with that said, you know your family better than anybody. At this point, they are aware that Beth is gonna run away from the table, pissed off, starting stuff, and then they're gonna sit around and enjoy dinner after that. You know, so
And
it's
they
knowing
do. They calmly do. That's so
that's it.
true.
Or we can fight, against the personality of the person. Not to say that somebody's gonna be that extreme, but what I've seen, and this is gonna be very logical, is that part of the disconnection that's happening with parents and with children and also again cross generations is we don't address the monster while it's small, right?
Yeah.
Because we're so out of touch with each other and missing out on the vital data that whether it's your significant other, whether it's your kids, they're giving you feedback and data on how they're doing and what they're struggling with, what might be causing them internal turmoil. But if we're not checking in, because a lot of our communication, we know that this is top tier psychology, the majority of our communication is nonverbal. All right.
Right.
So if you're not actually paying attention to your loved one, if you're not taking the time to actually see them and to be present, you're going to be missing out on a lot of that very vital data. So you could see, like, where are they really at? How are they really feeling? And I could see those little subtle things, but also just the act of when we're eating, you could see this kind of stress offload. My kids, we created a culture where they're talking about their days, where they're talking about this crazy stuff happening with these kids, the little Kardashian things going on just in like elementary school. My youngest son will joke about it. It's like it's not really that serious, but it's just like, what are these kids creating drama for, with each other?
Mhm.
But I would miss that if I didn't create an environment where he feels free to share those things. And
Mm.
so, okay, so we've got the kind of conventional family construct, but what if you're not living with family or you don't have kids right now?
Mhm. Yeah.
Again, we don't want to villainize having some time, like you can kick back, watch your favorite show and have a meal or on your lunch, whatever. That's cool. But what I would implore everybody to do is to schedule time each week. I'm a big fan. Three, it was three in the data. Three was at minimum effective
Oh, yeah,
dose,
3,
but
that's right, good point. You
two,
only have to do
even
this
two.
3 times a week.
But also, just depends on where you are right now. If you're going 0 to 3, that might be a big jump. Just even twice a
Yeah.
week scheduling. If it's a lunch with a friend,
Mhm.
if it's just going and having coffee, it is so important for your soul, for your psychology, and
Mm,
for your health truly to just we do so many things that are less important. Schedule that time. If your family isn't close by, whether it's a date night with your significant other, whether it's, a coffee with your friend, schedule it. It's make it real. Even the act of scheduling puts
yeah,
in place, like we schedule all this other stuff that is
yeah,
not nearly as important as your relationships and your health. Literally, we started this off talking about how our relationships are the most powerful controller of how long we're going to live. And
yeah.
by the way, in that study that I mentioned of the 148 studies, the meta-analysis from Brigham Young University, they also noted like relationships were more impactful than overcoming obesity, than
Oh,
exercise.
yeah,
They specifically noted
yeah,
those things. Like, yeah, those things are cool, but it is our relationship. So invest in that. And also, we need to make a shift in our culture. And we have to take it upon ourselves to do this right now.
yeah.
I went to the number 2 high school in Missouri. All right. It was ranked number 2. Such a good school. I didn't learn a thing about building healthy relationships, even
No,
though it is the most important determining factor on my health, on my success, on my happiness, on my habits. It is a tip of the spear kind of controller of everything else downstream.
yeah,
That's why it
yeah,
matters so much. But we're just not taught. You can accidentally have good relationships or accidentally have shitty ones. That's pretty much
right.
the state that we're in. We're just kind of thrown into this thing instead of like, no, that's what makes platforms like this so important is we could bring on the very best people in the world in their respective fields when it comes to relationships and learn from them, but we have to share this knowledge. We have to share it with our kids. We have to advocate for this start to get shared in kind of conventional education settings as well, because the quality of our relationships truly, I can't even stress this enough how important this is. But last little piece here, sometimes if we feel like we're lacking that, we can tell ourselves a story that it's not possible for us. It's not
Yeah,
accessible for us. And I'm telling you, from the perspective of someone that was isolated, I lived in Ferguson, Missouri at the time. I was the first person in my family to go to college, let alone graduate from college. And if you don't have a model, like it's just all manner of messed up things happening that are just obstacles in me figuring this thing out. I have a mattress on the floor at this 1 bedroom apartment, and my health is terrible. As you know, I was diagnosed with an advanced arthritic condition of my spine and my bones when I was just 20, which that's years in the making to have the manifestation of that condition, degenerative disc disease at just 20. All right, it's absurd. So I'm in
yeah,
I'm in massive pain. I am deeply, deeply feeling alone and a mismatch and like feeling like I'm trying to do something good with my life, but it just doesn't seem to work out. And so I know what it feels like to feel isolated. But when I made a decision to get well, number one, which a lot of times we don't do, we just kind of like, well, I don't know, we'll see. Well, I'll give this a try. I made a decision to get well, and little did I know that it would be through relationships that I was going to get there. I had a couple of, just kind of like distant friends, whatever. One of them, I had known her for like 3 years. And when I made the decision to get well, within 2 weeks, she took me to a health food store. We hadn't even been anywhere together before. It's just like I was just riding in the car with her and we pull up here. I didn't know that it existed, you know? And so now I realize because some of us can be also, extreme introverts, right? Or like
yeah, I was gonna say, that's
inside.
what we wanna speak to, is that person who loves being by themselves.
I refuel that way. I would
Yeah,
rather be hanging out with a good book and
yeah.
or going on a walk
Me
by
too.
myself,
I like a good
truly.
book.
All
Yeah,
right? I get it. And I know how vital it is because even the most introverted among us, we need each other. Our
Yeah.
genes expect us to connect. We would not survive. Throughout our evolution, we would not be here without other people helping us
Right.
to those inputs from again just even that touch and exposure. We need these things. And last little cherry on top, when I was in that situation and again deciding to get well, deciding to make it a mandate for myself to, and this is the tough part, sometimes we have to close a chapter on relationships that are not serving us, that could be hurting our health, really address those things, and sometimes to make room for something better. But we have to choose it and we have to qualify ourselves. A lot of these things have to do with us getting better ourselves so that we feel
First. Yeah.
truly like we deserve what we deserve. Because at the end of the day, we absolutely do, but sometimes we might not realize it.
So I have a couple thoughts came to me as you were talking about this, and I think you're the right guy to ask this too. So when we look at science and what we know about the research on everything, right? When you're talking about social research, you're talking about nutritional research. Those are often done, unless it's like a meta analysis like the Harvard one. Those are often done in a very contained environment. And then what I see that happens on social media is that we start debating science and we're like, no, that was done in mice. That wasn't done on women. And we start having this fight with each other about science, if it's right or if it's not right. And I'm starting to wonder, we're like, "Oh, I'm not gonna follow you anymore because you don't believe what I believe."
Mhm.
And so I feel like as much as I love the studies you're quoting, I'm also getting to the point where I'm starting to get frustrated with us using science as our guiding light for our proper health habits because it's too one-dimensional. And this is why I love what you said when we started, which is the social science with the nutritional science. How do we bring all these pieces together for our benefit? So I ask you that because I love your studies, but do you feel like science is leading us in the wrong direction when it comes to health because it is so curated and then we are having human arguments over it?
So part of the reason that I approach things in the way that I do, utilizing the best peer review data that we have. One of the things that I do, and this is the thing, it's like a full-time job, truly, to
Yeah, it
be able to
is. I
dig through
know.
this data and to find out who's funding the data, to look at, and
Yes.
here's the rub. This is the most challenging part. And I encourage people to do this if they really want to work in this field and work as a research scientist or something of the like. You have to also dig up and look at published papers that have some validity to them that disprove what you believe. All right.
Yeah.
So looking at both ends of the spectrum, because usually the truth is somewhere in the middle, and understanding a lot of these different studies they have a vested interest in affirming something.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we have to keep that in mind in our back pocket because, and this was my initial intention. And by the way, even in this particular, I mentioned this earlier, I've been in this field for 21 years and about 12, and I'm sorry, 11 years now, having the top health podcast in the country several times over, which kind of like it's like Billboard charts. But I brought something into play that didn't exist before, which was I use some peer-reviewed data and then I go into common sense. All right. I use
Right.
that as an open door because
Yes.
I know that the reality is just reality. And sometimes for especially for people like myself that are very analytical, that have a tendency of skepticism, to have a little bit of science, but now we got to get into like this is based on reality, this is based on your individual experience. Your anecdotal data that might be ignored in peer-reviewed literature is the most important aspect of your reality. And we have to honor that as well.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of
Absolutely.
been behind the scenes of how I think. And so now you'll see that replicated with a lot of my peers. And these folks, I end up meeting them later on, but we use this, here's this study, and then we go into whatever. And so it
Yeah.
was a format that I found to be helpful just to start to speak to different because we think in different ways, we learn in different ways. And so my attempt was to be more encompassing. And yeah, so again, we want to take some of this stuff with a grain of salt when it comes to the different studies that are out there, and also rejoice in the fact that there are even still most studies, unfortunately, today are getting funded by the pharmaceutical industry, processed
Yeah,
food industry, and it is what it is because just to get a grant, if scientists like students at school, they want to question something, they want to run something, you're not going to get money if you're going to
right.
do anything that goes against how everybody's profiting right now. So it's like it's very difficult. And we still do have scientists who are asking these really interesting questions, who are
Yes.
asking about how our relationships are really affecting us underneath the surface, asking how there's the microbiome is having a moment right now, for example, like
Yes, it
how does
is.
our gut health influence our mental health and all these different things. So we've got great people asking questions, even the sonic chip experiment, for example, really interesting, kind of funny, fun stuff. But that's we want to rejoice that, but also take it with a grain of salt.
So would you say then you look at sciences as an opportunity to be curious about
Yes,
whatever they found?
yes,
I find
yes.
the word curious really helpful because if we're curious about what we see with science, then we can make decisions for ourselves. It's like the phrase I always use is science gets us in the ballpark, you get to choose what seat you're going to sit at.
Yeah.
And we have to sort of integrate it for ourselves, which actually leads me to the next question that I have for you. I think you're the perfect guy to answer this. And it ties into this environment that we're eating in is that so many people right now are getting health advice from their social media feeds. And I'm curious, my fear is that we've gotten to this place where we're looking for small little sound bites to determine the direction that we go with our health. Do you feel like social media is helping our health or do you feel like it's hurting our health right now?
Such a good question. You know, at the end of the day, we're going to experience what we're associating with, what we're tuned into. So people that are following people that are out there teaching health information, they're going to have a tendency to engage in more of that stuff in the real world and to be potentially
Mm,
healthier. I think there's a higher likelihood
that's a good
because you're
way to
just
look at it.
tuned into
Yeah.
that station. Now, with that said, it can be frustrating because everybody and their mother and father is, coming with their perspective on things.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, even though we've got the most robust data set ever compiled about human health that is saying, hey, it is our relationships that, there are going to be people like, my relationships mess me up. I am messed up because of that. And
Yep.
again, we cannot ignore that that's a story, but also we don't want to be the person who is tuned into, another kind of virus, which is the missing the point virus that can get spread
Yes.
around, right? Because we tend to just see like that isn't true for me and close ourselves off from a potential. So we
Yes.
want to validate and honor our own stories, but also stay open. You said the magic word earlier, stay curious. Don't
Yep.
refute something immediately. Look at things from multiple perspectives. There's a great definition of wisdom that I learned many years ago is wisdom is looking at things from multiple perspectives. But I know for
Mm.
myself personally, growing up in the conditions that I did, I just saw through my one lens. I
Yep.
wasn't zooming out and looking at things from other people's perspectives, from a more of a like a meta perspective of looking at situations, good or bad, but there's our reality is based on our perception. And if we've got one view of things, we're going to suffer. If something disrupts our view of reality, we're going to be a total mess. But
Yep.
even when a challenge comes up, it's like we can even just by asking questions, for example, by being curious, we can instantly reframe things and find more of a like a silver lining. I'm thinking about Silver Linings
Yeah.
Playbook. Shout out to Bradley Cooper. But basically, like if there's a challenge coming up, it's just having the audacity to ask, what is this trying to teach me? What is this challenge trying to teach me? What is the potential gift in this? Right? Or if
Yes.
you're even if you're having a hard day, or you got a big task in front of you, something that's really difficult that you are resistant to even get into, asking like, how can I make this fun?
Yep.
Like we have the power to reframe things very quickly. And it's also, I found it to be very helpful to, there's a great exercise in the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, from way back in the day. And I was first introduced to this book by Bob Proctor, who was like a
Oh,
legend
yeah.
in personal
Yeah,
development.
he was.
And I cannot, again, coming from where I come from, how on earth am I having conversations with Bob Proctor? It is bananas. All right. But he
Solid.
shared this book with me. And there's this exercise to, when you're dealing with a challenge and or you're just trying to accomplish a goal, to seek counsel from your trusted advisors. But you do this
Mm,
mentally, right? So if you're wanting to improve your health, you close your eyes, maybe do some breathing exercises, and then you sit at a table. All right, here's we are sitting at the table, being a
yes.
unifier,
Yep,
and you've got Dr. Mindy Pelz sitting here. You've got Shawn Stevenson sitting next to
yeah.
her.
We're at your
You've
table.
got
I love it.
Dr. Bruce Lipton sitting on that side. And then on the other side, maybe it's three other people. And you go around the table and you pose that question to them. Okay, I've been struggling for the last 5 years to normalize my blood sugar. Like, I don't want to be on metformin anymore. Dr. Mindy, what do you recommend? And just listen,
Great idea.
right? So it's like bringing in multiple perspectives. Like, there's so many cool ways that we can go about this, but we don't want to box ourselves in by seeing things from a limited view, because another part of this freedom, another part of wisdom is seeking multiple perspectives.
That was so well said. Okay, I have to finish up this interview with probably maybe the most obvious question that we should have started with. And I know you and I are both huge Michael Beckwith fans. So, and I'd be curious what he would say. We can maybe energetically involve him in this answer. But and in any research that you saw where prayer before you eat has an impact on how that food is going to assimilate into your cells.
So good. All right. Right here in this building at my house. Michael Beckwith has been here and he's conducted prayers for us before we eat many, many times. And again, I would have never in a million years thought that that would be my life, you know? And there are a couple of things like this has been done for thousands of years by humans, by our ancestors. And part of this is, again, it's that opening the door of that switch over to the parasympathetic nervous system, right? To take a
Mm,
moment of pause, to slow down, to close our eyes, to breathe,
mm,
and to listen to a message of connection. And
mm,
even there's an entity there's like, we know today, even like folks at Heart Math Institute, just when we're in proximity to each other, the human heart has this very large electromagnetic field that extends beyond our bodies. And
mhm,
so these energies are interacting with each other. It's kind of like we're starting to sync up. We're getting on one accord. And this is affirmed by researchers at Princeton that just even a small people that don't even know each other, small amount of rapport is created. Our brains start to sync up. So they start to quote mirror
mm.
each other. All right.
Yeah,
So it's starting that process of synchronization. So that's part of it. And also there's an energy exchange because we know from the slit experiment, for example, the observer effect. We know that our observation of a thing changes the thing. We
yes,
are, in fact, changing the world around us. And it sounds very like it sounds like some science fiction stuff, but it is just reality. This is quantum physics. We cannot help but do it. And so
yeah,
we are, in fact, influencing. There's an energy exchange with that food itself. So yeah, you
yes,
might want to pray over your food. And we also have other practices. You got to find what feels good for you and your family as well. A gratitude practice. Take a moment to just go around the table and everybody could share three things that they're grateful for from that day.
yeah,
We could just take a moment of pause, a moment of presence,
yes,
just to take a breath. Like, but what it is that's opening the door for connection. It's like that first
yeah.
domino for a truly beneficial and connective meal with people that you care about.
So well said. I just heard something the other day. I want you to try this with your family, and it's blindfold eating. When you sit down, put a blindfold on and then really experience the food. And, like, taste it and feel it in the textures, like, when I heard that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think I would probably appreciate my meal a whole lot more if I had the vision sense was taken away, I could really dive into all the experience of eating and what it's providing that I'm probably missing with my eyes open. What do you
Like
think of
you
that?
just said it truly. I mean, food is a multi-sense experience, and definitely we can get way too distracted from certain experiences that are just like food really is an explosion. It's not ultra processed foods, but just real food itself. There's so many dynamic notes. And humans, by the way, we have a very complex flavor palette, largely because of the intersection with our flavor sensors and our nose. All right. It is
Yes.
the human nose is very special in the
Yes.
animal kingdom. We don't think about it like that because we're not like bloodhounds out here, sniffing
Yeah.
out, drugs getting confiscated or whatever at an airport. But our senses have been evolved to like humans eat a lot of different things, far more different foods than any species ever by far. We eat so many
Yeah.
different things. And so we evolved these senses to really know if a food is safe for us on an entirely different level. So yeah, little exercises like that can turn things on.
I have to tell you, as women, we actually smell out the best mate for us, and we smell it and interpret it as far as what that mate will do for our immune system, knowing that when we reproduce, there's going to be an immune change that happens when you actually get pregnant. And I'm sure you've seen this study that when women are on birth control, it can alter their ability to smell the proper partner, and they get married and then they get off birth control and they have this shift in their relationship to their partner. So
Yeah.
you bet, yeah, smells huge. We're not bloodhounds, but we are controlled by it, and we just don't give it enough credit. So I just had to put that plug in there because I think smell is a very underrated part of our body when it comes to how we make health habit choices and how we make choices in our life.
And it's the strongest sensory experience connected to our memory as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it's like
because it goes right up to
olfactory.
the yeah,
Yeah. So like
yeah,
we smell certain smells can bring us back to certain moments, like few things can, for sure.
yeah.
And also just
Oh
that
my
memory, like I know exactly how a bowl of Fruit Loops smells. All
yes,
right. Like it's so deeply ingrained. But again, this is another thing for us to take advantage of together with our families.
right.
One of the big first steps of food is the smells. I just did a segment on Good Morning America last week, and the room, the people behind the scenes, they were flipping out over the smells of this slow cooker chili that's in the cookbook, and they're
Yeah,
just like eating the smells, like they're like grabbing it out the air. So it's just
yeah,
like it's one of those things that is so inviting and pleasant, and it's another thing to experience with people that you care about.
yeah. Amazing, amazing. Okay, well, before I ask you my last question, how do people find you, your cookbook, your podcast? I hope people go diving into all of this.
Ah, thank you so much. So you can pick up the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook anywhere that books are sold. All
It's
right,
such a
it's out
beautiful
there,
book.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all the good stuff. I actually just saw today that it is officially a USA Today national bestseller.
Congrats.
That list just came out today. I'm very grateful for that. And we're not stopping. The
Yes.
mission is just getting started because we're creating a movement for family wellness and empowerment. And also, I just saw because the book is doing so well, Amazon has dropped the price by 20% on Amazon as well. So you
Amazing.
can go to Amazon.com or an Amazon bookstore and pick it up there as well. But definitely a fan of supporting local bookstores and keeping their
Yes.
doors open. There's a great vibe
Yes.
in going to a bookstore still, but you could pick up the book anywhere. It's such an honor. Eat Smarter Family Cookbook. And my show is called The Model Health Show, The Model Health Show. And it's available on all podcast platforms. So you can find me there. We do master classes on every subject matter that you can imagine, and also bring on the very best people in the world in their respective fields. Of course, you've been on there. The show was fire. It was so good.
It
And
was
one of our
fun.
most downloaded episodes of the year. And
Awesome.
so you can tap in there. And the great thing about that, again, we're creating this. All you have to do is click play. These platforms is free, and we get to determine like what are we tuned into, because we
Yeah.
could be spending that time tuned into whatever else, and
Yes.
that's fine. But take that time, and invest in your empowerment, your education, things that make you feel good and feel more powerful in this world that is often fighting against you. You got to fill up your own cup. And so that's what it's really all about. And that's why I appreciate you so much as well, because
Oh,
you provided
appreciate you.
so much of that goodness for so many people.
Yeah,
And I
thank
just want to
you.
thank you for that because we definitely feel it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, our hearts are aligned. I think we both are deeply in this to create change. So thank you for having this conversation. Okay, my last question, and I'm so curious what you're going to say. What's your superpower? What do you think if you had to pick one superpower you bring to this world, what do you think it is?
Oh, such a good question. My superpower, and I'm not just saying this, I'm
No,
also a
brag
firm,
about yourself.
I'm a very big like proof of concept person because it's not just me saying this, but what's been shared with me again and again and again is that my superpower is connection. It's helping
Mhm.
people to understand things that would be seemingly complex in a very simple and palatable and empowering way. So that's really my superpower, is taking the complex and simplifying it so that we can actually use it for our benefit should we choose to.
Love it. I love it. Well, Shawn, thank you. You literally, I've been really thinking deeply about food and the environment we eat. And then poof, here we are having this conversation. So thank you for all the hard work and going through the science. And I hope everybody grabs your book. So appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.